Welcome to Tying Michigan's Best Trout Flies. We're getting really close to the Hendrickson hatch. So we're going to take a few minutes today and talk about some specifics regarding that hatch, some things that I've picked up over the years, and then we're going to include one specific pattern that I think you're going to like. So let's get going. Well, here it is around the middle of April. That means that it's soon to be Hendrickson time. In fact, for some of you, it might be already, depending on where you are in the U.S. In northern Michigan, not quite yet, but pretty soon. So I wanted to just pass along a few tips that might help you to fish this hatch. I've been fishing it for 50 years or so, and I found some things that have really helped me, and some things that are kind of set in stone, that supposedly anyway, that aren't necessarily really set in stone when you get out and fish it on a regular basis. So let's start from the beginning. The Hendrickson hatch, normally the emergence itself is an afternoon affair. I say normally because it depends to a certain extent on weather. And of course, the spinner fall, generally speaking, comes in the evening. That's not always necessarily the case either. The reason I'm saying that is because in hot weather, Hendricksons will hatch in the morning. I've experienced this a number of times, even up here in northern Michigan. We had weather at the end of April that got into the mid and upper 80s for several days. The hatch moved to 9 o'clock in the morning. And I remember one day just getting out around noon. I had fished the hatch all morning, and some guys were putting their boats in, getting ready to go fish the afternoon hatch. I didn't have the heart to tell them that it was all over. But that can happen. So keep an eye on the weather and check with your local fly shops before you go out. Normally, most of the time, it is going to be an afternoon event, but not necessarily, not always. The other thing I found is fishing the hatch itself. There's a pre-hatch period where fishing a weighted nymph is very successful. And I've caught a number of good fish fishing that before the actual emergence. But when the actual emergence starts and you start to see fish on the surface, that's when the action gets hot and heavy. And I wanted to share with you, as long as we're talking, a fly that I've used over the years that has probably caught more fish than any single pattern I've used during the Hendrickson hatch. And it's not a dry fly. It's a wet emerger. And I'm going to put a size 12 wet fly hook in the vise, and these flies in this species have a tendency to emerge or pop their wing cases below the surface, and their wings start to stick out of the wing case. It's almost like when the fish see those partially emerged wings, they get excited. This fly does a tremendous job of imitating that stage of the hatch, and I have actually fished this fly through the entire hatch without ever putting a dry fly on. In fact, I did that a number of times. In fact, this fly was my go-to fly most of the time. I probably, fishing Hendricksons over the years, I've probably fished this fly perhaps 75% of the time, even during the hatch and even when fish were rising. So I've got a size 12 wet fly hook in the vise. I'm just using some brown thread. It's a very, very simple fly, one that only takes just a few minutes to tie. I'm going to throw on for the tail just a few wisps of a little bit of partridge here. That's going to make the tail. Doesn't have to be that, but it's kind of the right color, so you can use whatever you want there. But there's a little tail for our little emerging wet Hendrickson. And then the body is going to be made composed of some hare's ear and a little bit of rusty brown fur. I mixed that together. So we'll throw on a little bit of that dubbing and make a body. Again, it's a simple fly. And when we get up about part way, we'll stop the dubbing and add a partially emerged wing. I'll show you how to do that here in just a minute. We'll just throw this on. Nice loose dubbing so the guard hairs stick out like that. When we get right to there, we can stop. I put too much on, so I'll take a little bit of that off. But right about there, we'll stop. And then to put on the partially emerged wing, I just use a little bit of dark gray marabou, and this was from a black or a dark dun hackle at the base of it. You can buy the marabou, but I just use these leftover things. Just a section of this, but when you tie it on, here's a tip for you. Make it kind of a thick section like this, because when this gets wet, it's going to compress down quite a bit. And so you want it, the tip of this wing to extend back maybe to the bend of the hook, looking like a partially emerged wing. So we'll just clip that off there and tie it in. And just like that. That's all there is to it. I got a little dubbing left on there. I didn't do that intentionally, but you can do that. So we'll just finish the fly off with a little bit of that dubbing up to the front and tie it off. And this fly I have probably caught more fish on in a Hendrickson hatch than any other fly that I've used. You can use this, what I found is through the entire emergence, and you can use it to rising fish. Just let it sink, cast across and down, and let it sink, and time it so that the current lifts it up in front of the rising fish and be ready for a jolt. This fly is just a tremendous fly to fish the Hendrickson hatch with. And as far as one more thing about that spinner fall, depending on the weather, remember that weather governs a lot of things. Normally it's an evening event, but if the weather gets cold several nights in a row, the very next day the flies are going to have to go or they're going to die. So it's often common to see Hendrickson spinner falls in the middle of the day once the day warms up after you've had several cold nights. So keep those things in mind. It'll probably improve your fishing, and give this fly a try. So thanks very much, and we'll see you the next time.